just create the JSON object.
Yeah, and that should be. Let's see, what are we passing?
There's a red, and then this should default to
Is more than one mongoose mongoose?
Is more than one moose two meese?
Yes. Or would you say mongooses?
Mon guy.
Touche.
There, finally. Okay. So we want title, author, and created. Let's see. The title is going to be
All right, let's take a look at the solution now.
really.
Really, we got a lot to do, man. This is just review right here. Okay, so let's go to the solution here. Let's take a look at that. All right, so how did that activity go? How did that warm-up go? You feel okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're doing is just looking at review, but we're mixing a couple things in that we haven't seen in a little while. Okay, nothing too major though.
Obviously, they got theirs going again too.
Yeah, internet's back for everybody. All right, so let's talk about each route in particular. We can see that at the beginning of this application, we have some dependency requirements that we're doing here. We're going and configuring those with our Express app, creating up assets folder, doing our Mongo.js configuration with our particular database that we're working with, and then hooking it into the DB variable. Then we get down to our routes. Of course, we always have our kind of simple root route. That really not much to talk about there, other than that it's returning that index.html document. Let's go ahead and talk about this route. Who would like to volunteer to discuss what's happening here? Anybody? The DB, it starts here at that post that's at the very top.
From what I gathered, it was taking essentially what the user input for the title author and the title of book name was and saving it to the variable book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the rec.body, so you're getting that object. So now book's the object of those two, keep their values.
Mm-hmm. And that's the entire body of the request, right?
And you're adding to that object with the book.read, so using object.notation there, and you're setting it to false.
Why we do that right there, but let's just stop for a second and talk about why. Because of the fact that when Ajax sends anything back from the client side, it's sending it as strings. We can't actually have a true Boolean. We could always like compile it and do some programming to interpret what it was, but it's much easier to just add it in this step. So we've already got the request in from the client. Now we're doing some server stuff. So we add the Boolean on the server. Go ahead, continue.
And then now you're using the Mongo.js to create your collection called books. You're saving the object book that you just created with those three pieces of information. And then you are calling that function. I guess it definitely don't really have to call that function, right? But now you want to just console.log the data that came back.
Yeah, and we're sending back the response with.
If you just had like dbbooks.save book, I mean, you're good at the database, right?
It's allowing us to update the view with the new book that we just added. Okay, so let's move down to the next route. The app.get/read. Anybody want to try to take this one? Joey.
Well, it's just going into the Mongo database and finding everything that's in there that has that Boolean of that pertains to the read value of true, and then spitting it out.
And it's using this found parameter to be whatever results come from that querying of the Mongo database, right? Okay, pretty simple one. And then we have unread. Anybody want to try to tackle this one? Chance?
Substitute true for false for the previous.
Yeah, clever. It's basically the same thing, right? Just a different find parameter there on our find. And then finally, this computer wants to be bitched today. Okay, so we have our app.get mark read :id. Anybody want to try to tackle this one? Ruben. Do you see them all the way back there? Okay, I can zoom it up if you want.
All right, so it's basically going to be going into the book database date, and it's going to object ID.
Yep, so it's taking that parameter from whatever URL is the endpoint that the user hits. So they're going to hit something like mark read and then that object ID number, okay? Now they're not typing this into the browser. It's actually a link that we've created in our index, but what it's doing is it's collecting that ID from that URL. Go ahead, continue.
Right there, the $sign made and switches it to true.
Right. Really not much else going on there except for the fact that we are sending back the edited, changed stuff to update the view with the response, okay? Just like we had done in some of the other ones. One more route here. All right, who would like to tackle this one? Cecile, you look like you wanted to tackle it.
The same thing as what Ruben said, but I changed it.
But the opposite, right? Wow. Insightful. Really nothing different there. And then, of course, we have our app.listen, which actually launches our application. Okay? Warm up. I kind of made you move a little quickly through it because we are crunched for time, and we're going to get right into Mongoose now. Okay? Oh. Let's talk a little bit about Mongo. Mongo is very flexible, okay? It's a NoSQL database, as we talked about, right? One of the features of Mongo is that it is schema-less, right? You know that, right? We're all familiar with why that is, right? Okay, so the first thing that happens in the world of technology when something's like, oh, I do this thing really great and nothing else, they go, oh, that's nice, but now we want to add packages to make you do other things, right? So that's why Mongoose came and became part of the fun. All right. So the database is very flexible. It allows us to kind of approach our data modeling without a schema and just kind of build it as ad hoc as needed. And that's part of its power. But sometimes we don't need that. Sometimes we need something to be a little stricter. We don't want to save a true or an actual array as a book, or save a book without a title, or save a book with the same name and author, okay? So somebody entered data wrong, right? Okay, but the flexibility of MongoDB makes all of that possible, okay? So all that can be done and will happen without any kind of squawk back or pushback from your application. Really add dupes and things like that to your database, which is not a good thing, right? Okay, so that is specifically why Mongoose came out, okay? So what about some other things? So sometimes we want to combine two collections of information, right? We have one kind of document or one collection of documents. We have another collection of documents. We want to kind of relate them, okay? For instance, what if we have our authors and our books stored in separate collections? We would want to have maybe a place where we display a list of all author data along with the books that they wrote in line, okay? So we need to make that relation. Okay, and once again, it's not a relational database, so that's the power and general purpose of MySQL, this relational database. But now we're working with something that's not SQL. Okay, so we don't have joins in came in. So Mongoose lets us define models for our Mongo data. Okay, that means that we can set types. So there's no surprise type. We're saying this is an integer. There's many different of these predefined types. It will also allow us to create custom types. So if we wanted to have a custom data type, we can set that up. As I said, one of the real powers of Mongoose is it allows us to create custom functions to handle our data in ways that we don't have baked in or that we're not getting direct input from the user. Okay, so do some programming stuff to enter things into our database. And lastly, we can combine collections with this method called populate. Okay, and it offers somewhat similar functionality to the MySQL join. So info dump complete. Now it's time for everybody to find out why Mongoose is so good to you. It's so sweet to you. All right, so I want everybody to partner up with a classmate that's sitting next to you, okay? And I want you to discuss when they, oh, this shit again. When you might want to use Mongoose versus, let's say, the Mongo.js that we've been using, or something even more rudimentary like MySQL or SQLize, okay? So this helps us identify why we use this package, is to understand the use cases that we might actually apply it to, okay? We're gonna just do this for about 3 minutes, and then I'm gonna call on a few of you guys for answers, okay? So go ahead and spend time, and this is a partner activity, so I better hear some noise in here, or else I will have to inject some sort of trick. There we go. The internet may be down, but we still got sneaker net.
You already have Mongoose database, Mongo databases, but you need to have a more structured, you have yet another feature that you need to add in, or not enough to where you could justify but more than you get from Mongo.
True. Absolutely. Also, MySQL, you have a not null value. You need to set that for certain things that will be fields and that will absolutely need that value. Likewise, I can think of reason for using Mongoose with Mongo.js over SQLize and documentation. Like that's one reason. Definitely not a big one. I wanted to use Mongo and Mongoose instead.
I feel like Mongoose is for people that like really want to use MySQL and somebody told them they can't.
Well, I mean, familiarity, perhaps. If they have a data structure,
Like they can't appreciate a good thing when they see it.
well, having options is never about doing so. Simply two different ways.
Having options is definitely a bad
Sometimes
thing.
you don't really know what you want.
Yeah, definitely.
27 pages.
I'll have it to go, cold, no sugar, large glass. It's like enough. I just want the tea. Like, I just want tea. Okay, man. Yeah, I like Mongo a lot. I like it a lot.
I wonder if it's more.
I like MySQL also, but this is more regular. For basic stuff, it's like whatever, dude.
I wonder if also
It's great. MySQL is cool too. It's like natural language. Once you get SQLize in, I'm like, what? I mean, it works until it tells you, but otherwise, I'd be like.
Wonder how
So we're looking for like
fast and
what
big
use
it
cases
is.
are best tailored for each.
I'm actually
Or you look at me like
as
that.
far as the performance methods. This is
Yes.
one that's faster than what I
Have we not done this activity similar or something?
Yeah, no, I'm just making sure that's exactly what I'm looking for because like right now I know that
Basically.
I want to use Mongo when I desire auto sharding.
Auto shard
Yeah, like if that's what
feels
I'm into,
good.
yeah, that's what I'm into. I'm going for Mongo for sure.
Just remember, poop your pants, lose your freedom. Those are the rules.
That's going on my head still. So if you want auto sharding, you
For
definitely.
some reason, I think you might have used that before.
I do have kids.
That's awesome.
That's for sure.
Kiddos.
Jim, do you like Mongoose?
I do. I love mongooses. They're cool.
Because we're in the merge stack, not the CERN stack. That's why you use Mongoose.
In fact, the little beer cats are actually mongoose, technically. It's a.
It's the reason that you use Mongoose is because
You can also
Much easier. You know, if you're working with a large data set, you're needing to validate data, you're needing to have type data. You can build all that yourself, but why would you want to do that? You know, it's like the same thing of like, there was a question we were working with ORMs. Can we just build our own ORM instead of using this one? And it's like, yes, you can. But why? You know, why?
because the documentation on this would suck.
Well, that's the thing about Mongoose. It is literally the most downloaded plugin for Mongo, and it has a billion plugins for it too. So it's very extensible, and it's meant to extend. So it's a very heavily relied upon library. Very, very.
Yeah, no, it's more.
You know, it's like the same thing. Like you can have a basic setup on a database, but it's much better to have some abstraction and have an ORM layer and things like that. You know, in this case, ORD.
so like
ODM, ODM.
it also
Sounds like something that's almost illegal.
Do you think it's something the same as
All right. Okay. Great. Okay. So, let's talk about. Did you guys identify any cases where you would use Mongo or Mongoose? Mongoose.
yeah.
Validate your data.
Yep. So validating data, very, very important in the database. You don't want a database filled with crap, right? Okay. Anybody else find a good use case? Mongoose
Mongoose, if you.
over MySQL and all that other junk.
Well, what I would say is that if you don't know what, my argument is actually pretty other. Maybe you should wait.
Okay. What is the project that you're thinking of then?
Well, mainly I'm thinking like if you don't already know exactly what your data structure is going to look like and you're more like an experimental exploration phase, something like Mongo is easier for you to kind of throw a bunch of stuff on the wall and see what you need to make your schema better.
Yeah. I mean, and so it's kind of weird and you know, the MongoDB, and I think we touched on this when we first started getting into MongoDB, there's a bit of hype around MongoDB. Statements that don't really hold up, like, oh, you can migrate it so much easier than you could migrate MySQL. It's not hard to fucking add a field to a table in MySQL. Alter table, it's there, and you can do it, okay? You know, and then you can drop that you can alter table, drop that what you just added, and things will proceed fine, okay? Mongo doesn't have a schema. Well, schema, there's three schemas. There's a schema that's in your mind that you're planning out when you're thinking about the data. There's a schema that actually gets implemented on the database, and even if you think that it's a schema list, there's still some sort of schema to the way the data is set up. And then there's the third schema, which is the way you should have done it, right? All right. Cool. I think that's enough answers. I think we all kind of got some value out of that 5 minutes of research. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a schema example. All right, so go over this style of making a model. So let's go ahead and open that up. Okay. So here is my server for my Mongoose. In Server.js, we can scroll down to where we have the Mongoose fun starts here, all right? To this pretty simple style right here where it says that MongoDB localhost and then whatever the name of your actual database that you're trying to connect to. So it simplifies the database connection. Log that at that point inside of that connection string. Okay. After that, once we have a open connection to Mongoose, basically what we're doing is we tell the console that we have established a successful connection. Okay. So all pretty simple boilerplate type stuff. Then if we scroll a little further down in this example on line 48, what we're doing is we're loading in this example model.js. Okay, go ahead.
Line 38, the db.once, is that a native function of the Mongoose? Because that seems like it had a lot of other use cases.
It's part of it's a method that's in there, and it's being saying once this connection has happened.
Because we used something similar with the dot then, but that was for a different library.
It's similar.
So I was wondering, is that simply like a native JavaScript that we can manipulate elsewhere, or is that simply a function of its?
I don't believe it's
syntax?
a native thing of JavaScript. You double check for that. I'll put that on the Slack channel, and we'll answer that question. Okay. Okay, so back where I was. Okay, so what we're doing here is we are requiring, this is the model, and this is where much of the Mongoose actual activity will lie inside of this example model.js, okay? The models get called like objects and instantiated from the class. So if we head on down, we can see that example is our class, okay? Sorry, example is our object, which is created off a class that exists over in our example model.js. Manipulate this in our routes that we see here. Okay, so we're saying something like right here on line 72, var content equals new example. Okay, so we're building a new of whatever we got from that request. All right, and it's going to reference it back to how it builds that model is going to reference back to that example model.js, which I'm about to bring up. Okay, and we can take a look at that portion. We have that new example class we defined above, and we can check our body against that example model. Second, why did that change? All right. So let's go ahead and bring up example model now, so we can take a look at what's happening on the other side. And example model looks like this. Okay, so example model runs is basically setting up our schema for that will eventually become our model for our data. Okay, so one of the first things that we see here is first we create a variable called schema, which we relate to the Mongoose schema. Okay, then what we do is we create a new instance of that class. Okay, so this example schema is built off of the variable schema as its model. Okay, in that we're building out the schema for this that we're going to use in this particular activity. We are creating, basically creating data types here: string, number, email, Boolean, array. Okay, and then finally a long string. Now, if we go back up and we take a look at this, we can see that here is the unique Mongoose syntax, which allows us to do things like required equals true, which will force that to be a required field in the database. So if we attempt to send data and we don't have a required field, it's going to send back a response in JSON format that says, sorry, we did not add that to the database. Failed, right? Okay. And then, of course, we can also do things like matching out, using a regex formula. Obviously, we can have special types like booleans and arrays that are set up, dates, okay? And then down here on the long string, we see a validation function, all right? So the validation function basically opens up an array of could be more than one function within this validation array. But in this case, we only have this one function, which allows us to see if the input for long strings, so if the type is long string, the input has to be more than 6 characters. Otherwise, it'll send us back that JSON response that says, nope, didn't add it to the database. Okay, so we close out our model. Our schema, sorry. And what this does is this line down here will actually create the model from the above schema. Okay, so this is what we were pulling in over on the other side. And then finally, all we have to do is wrap that up and send it out to export to the server.js.
Yeah, so going back to validate, you said you could input multiple functions towards that array. If it fails to meet any of those functions, does it output the same error message?
Yeah, if it doesn't pass the validation function, it's going to come back with a JSON response that says, failed to, however we want to call it, not enough characters, or the password has to be 6 characters, whatever we want to squawk back.
Yeah, but if you have multiple functions in that array.
Well, it's going to run through all of them. So there could be.
It'll give you the same error message.
Yeah, there could be a potential to have to run multiple different validations. most of the time it's better to keep your validation simple down to one function, I think. You know, there's always a possibility that you may need some sort of deeper functionality of validating data that's coming across.
So you say in an array of functions. So basically on line 8, you'd put a comma and you'd start another function right there.
Yeah.
So it would, okay. So then it would run through each one of those. And so you could
Potentially.
have a unique error message for each one because it's.
We're getting stuck on the multiple function thing. We're not going to do that in this class. There is a potential to do that, but there's no need to do that. We can do all the validation function within one delicious JavaScript function.
And on line 22, there's a required, then it has a string is required.
Line 22. Okay, so yeah, that's the message that if the required squawks back, that's what you're going to be sending the user in the response.
So
string is required.
Okay.
So if it's not a string, so
it's another type of validation kind of built into the required.
So if they don't enter something for it, then it's going to come back and say string is required.
Or if they enter a number. Maybe not.
It may try to string it by that number, actually. This is a required, so it's just like making to see that you did enter some data. It's not validating the data in any kind of way. Okay, cool. Let's see, I think that's everything to cover in these 2 files. Now, this is so brand new type stuff, but what we like to do is just barely introduce something to you and then throw you in, and then that's when the questions will generate, and we'll get the TAs moving around and circulating, because this part is a big step getting into using Mongo and creating these schemas. What you'll notice as you're working through them is it's not that much different than what we've already done when we created a schema with an ORM. Okay, so a little different approach, but essentially we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to create that database abstraction, those kind of things like validation and setting requirements and things like that on the database. All right. So what we're going to move into now is a nice partner activity. Okay. So I want you to once again partner with the person that you were working with before. I think, yeah, that works. I think. Okay. So I've demonstrated some key aspects, but I'll just run through them pretty quickly of Mongoose. Or Mongoose schemas in particular, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the activity that you guys are going to build to right now on my machine. Okay, so we're going to bring up this. Close this one.
Okay. So first we have to do the NPM install. So if you haven't already launched
Yeah, go ahead and get those NPM installs started. Okay. Take a while. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this server so we can take a look at what this application looks like. So node server.js. Starting it up.
Don't get too excited about the skeleton.
It's a skeleton.
Skeletor.
And it says that I have successfully launched my application and it is now running on port 3000 of localhost. So I'll go ahead and bring that up.
Username, password, emails.
All right, so we're presented with some forms. So I can say username, Jim, password. Well, it was on a password with a message of password should be longer. Okay, so it's telling me that I have password. So let's try again. So I'm going to go back to my root of my application, and I'm going to choose a new password.
Password by chance.
Okay, I have chosen a password that no one will ever guess, and I am ready to move forward. Let's try.